Have you ever noticed that two people can reach the same age and yet find themselves in completely different circumstances? One remains engaged, energetic, and present, still participating fully in the activities that have always mattered to them. The other finds themselves gradually withdrawing, not by choice, but because their body or their mind no longer cooperates in the ways it once did. We tend to assume this difference is simply genetics, or luck, or the inevitable randomness of aging. But what if it's something else? What if the gap between these two outcomes is shaped, more than we realize, by choices that accumulate quietly over decades, choices so small we hardly notice them, yet so significant they can determine the entire trajectory of our later years? This is not a question about avoiding age. It is a question about something far more interesting: what the body is actually responding to, day after day, and what that means for how we might think about the years ahead. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging, the pattern of resilience, understanding how the body responds to life's demands. There is a question worth considering, not because it has a simple answer, but because the attempt to answer it reveals something important about how we might think about health. The question is this: why do some people seem to weather the passing years with greater ease than others? Why do two individuals of the same age, with similar backgrounds, often find themselves in very different circumstances when it comes to how they feel, how clearly they think, and how much they are able to participate in the activities that matter to them? If you have spent any time observing the people around you, you have likely noticed that the differences become more apparent with time. In youth, the gap between those who will age well and those who will struggle is often hidden. But as the decades pass, the patterns emerge. Some individuals remain engaged, energetic, and present. Others find themselves gradually withdrawing from activities they once loved, not by choice, but because their bodies or their minds no longer cooperate in the ways they once did. What accounts for this difference? The answer is not found in any single factor. There is no one food, no single supplement, no particular exercise that explains why some people maintain their vitality while others lose it. Instead, what emerges from decades of observation and research is something more subtle and more interesting. It is a pattern of small, consistent choices that accumulate over time. It is an understanding that the body is not a machine that simply wears out, but a living system that responds to how it is treated. And it is the recognition that much of what we call aging is not the inevitable passage of time, but the body's response to demands placed upon it. This is not to suggest that aging itself can be stopped or reversed. The passage of time is real, and its effects are real. But there is a growing body of evidence suggesting that many of the changes we associate with aging are not purely chronological. They are the result of accumulated stress, nutrient depletion, inflammation, and metabolic disturbances that, while common, are not inevitable. And if these changes are not inevitable, then perhaps there are things we can do, not to stop time, but to work with our bodies in ways that allow us to maintain more of what matters for longer. What follows is an exploration of these ideas. It is not a prescription. It is not a set of rules you must follow. It is simply an invitation to consider how the body responds to the demands of modern life, and what that might mean for how we choose to live. The body's response to what we consume. The human body is remarkably adaptable. It can survive in a wide range of environments, on a wide variety of foods, under conditions that would seem to push it to its limits. This adaptability is one of our great strengths as a species. But adaptability has its limits, and it has its costs. When we consume something, the body must do something with it. Food is not simply fuel in the way that gasoline is fuel for a car. It is a complex mixture of compounds that must be broken down, sorted, and directed to various uses. Some of it becomes energy, Some of it becomes building material for cells and tissues. Some of it is stored for later use. And some of it must be neutralized and eliminated because it is, in some way, a burden rather than a benefit. This last category is worth considering more carefully. Every substance that enters the body places demands on its systems. Even nutrients that are essential for life must be processed, and that processing requires energy and resources. But some substances place greater demands than others. They require the body to draw upon its reserves, to activate detoxification pathways, and to manage inflammatory responses. Over time, if these demands are frequent and intense, the body's reserves can become depleted. Consider sugar. For example, sugar is not a toxin in the way that poison is a toxin. The body has pathways for handling it, and under normal circumstances, it does so efficiently. But the circumstances under which most people consume sugar today are not normal in the context of human history. The amount of sugar entering the bloodstream at any given time, and the frequency with which it enters, places demands on the body that it may not be equipped to handle indefinitely. When sugar enters the bloodstream rapidly, the body must respond quickly to bring it under control. Insulin is released, and cells are instructed to take up this sugar. But the process of managing high blood sugar creates oxidative stress. Think of it as a kind of metabolic friction. Wherever there is rapid metabolism, there are byproducts that can damage surrounding tissues. This is why consistently high blood sugar is associated with changes in blood vessels, in nerves, in the eyes, and in the kidneys. It is not that sugar itself is poisonous. It is that the body's attempts to manage large amounts of it, over long periods, create wear and tear that accumulates. There is another aspect to consider as well. The metabolism of sugar requires certain nutrients. Enzymes that break down sugar depend on B vitamins, particularly thiamine, or B1. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of reactions related to energy production. Zinc supports the enzymes that protect cells from oxidative damage. When sugar is consumed in its natural context, embedded in whole foods that contain these nutrients, the body has what it needs to process it. But when sugar is consumed in refined forms, stripped of its accompanying nutrients, the body must draw upon its own stores. Over time, this can lead to deficiencies that show up in various ways. Fatigue, muscle cramps, weakened immunity, difficulty concentrating. This pattern is not unique to sugar. It applies to many of the foods that dominate modern diets. Refined grains, for example, have had most of their nutrients removed during processing. When they are consumed, the body must again draw upon its reserves to metabolize them. The same is true for alcohol, which not only requires nutrients for its metabolism, but also creates additional burdens on the liver. Even some medications, while providing important benefits, can deplete nutrients over time. The point is not that these substances must be avoided entirely. That would be unrealistic for most people, and perhaps unnecessary. The point is that the body has limited reserves, and when those reserves are constantly drawn upon without being replenished, something has to give. Understanding this dynamic opens up a different way of thinking about health. It suggests that part of supporting the body over the long term is being mindful of the demands we place upon it, and being intentional about replenishing what is used. The concept of buffering. One of the most useful ways to think about how the body handles what we consume is through the concept of buffering. A buffer, in the chemical sense, is something that moderates change. It absorbs excess, smooths out peaks and valleys, and prevents extreme swings. In the context of nutrition, certain foods and food components act as buffers, slowing the rate at which sugar enters the bloodstream and reducing the demand on the body's regulatory systems. Fiber is perhaps the most important example. Fiber is a carbohydrate, But unlike other carbohydrates, it does not raise blood sugar. It passes through the digestive system largely intact, and in doing so, it performs several functions that are relevant to how the body handles other foods. When fiber is present in a meal, it physically slows the digestion and absorption of other carbohydrates. Sugar that would otherwise enter the bloodstream rapidly is released more gradually. The spike in blood sugar is blunted, and the corresponding insulin response is moderated. Over time, this matters. Every time blood sugar spikes, there is a cost. Reducing the frequency and intensity of these spikes reduces the cumulative burden on the body. Fiber also feeds the bacteria that live in the gut. These bacteria, when properly supported, produce compounds that have wide-ranging effects on health. They influence inflammation. They support the integrity of the intestinal lining. And they even communicate with the brain. A diet that includes adequate fiber is, in many ways, a diet that supports the entire system. Fat is another buffer. Fat slows gastric emptying, meaning that food stays in the stomach longer and is released into the small intestine more gradually. This has the effect of flattening the blood sugar response to any carbohydrates in the meal. Fat also has minimal effect on insulin directly, which means that meals containing fat tend to produce a more moderate hormonal response than meals that are high in carbohydrates and low in fat. This is why traditional meals often combine carbohydrates with fat and protein. Bread with butter, rice with oil, potatoes with meat. These combinations are not accidental. They represent a kind of practical wisdom about how different foods interact in the body. The fat moderates the body's response to the carbohydrates, and the result is a more stable, sustained release of energy rather than a spike followed by a crash. Acid, in the form of vinegar or fermented foods, also acts as a buffer. Compounds like acetic acid have been shown to slow the digestion of starches and improve the body's sensitivity to insulin. A salad dressed with vinegar, or vegetables that have been fermented, can have a different effect on blood sugar than the same foods eaten without acid. Again, it is not that one way of eating is right and another wrong. It is that understanding these interactions allows for more informed choices. The practical implication is this: meals that combine fiber, fat, and acid tend to be handled differently by the body than meals that lack these components. A plate of refined pasta with tomato sauce, for example, is mostly carbohydrate with minimal fiber and fat. It will be absorbed quickly, and the body will need to mount a rapid response. The same amount of pasta, served with a generous portion of vegetables dressed in olive oil and vinegar, will be absorbed more slowly. The blood sugar response will be more moderate. The demands on the body will be reduced. This is not about perfection. It is about understanding that small adjustments to how meals are composed can have meaningful effects over time. The body does not require perfection. It requires, over the long term, that the demands placed upon it do not consistently exceed its capacity to respond. The body's reserves. Every living organism has reserves. Plants store energy in roots and seeds. Animals store fat to draw upon when food is scarce. Humans, too, have reserves, not just of energy, but of nutrients, of physiological capacity, of resilience. These reserves are what allow us to get through periods of stress, illness, or scarcity. They are also what allow us to handle occasional dietary indiscretions without immediate consequence. But reserves can be depleted. When demands consistently outpace replenishment, the body draws down its stores. At first, this may not be noticeable. The body is designed to maintain normal function even as reserves decline. But at some point, the reserves reach a level where they can no longer buffer against demands. Symptoms begin to appear: fatigue, brain fog, muscle cramps, weakened immunity, These are not diseases in the conventional sense. They are signals that the body's reserves have been drawn down too far. Consider magnesium. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions. It supports muscle relaxation, nerve function, energy production, and the maintenance of healthy bones. The body does not produce magnesium. It must be obtained from food, and it is used constantly, in small amounts, for all of these processes. When magnesium intake is consistently adequate, the body maintains its reserves. But when intake falls short, or when demand increases, the body begins to draw down its stores. Stress increases magnesium excretion. Sugar metabolism requires magnesium. Certain medications can interfere with magnesium absorption. Over time, a person who eats a diet low in magnesium-rich foods, who experiences chronic stress, who consumes sugar regularly, may gradually deplete their magnesium reserves. The first signs might be subtle. Occasional muscle twitches, trouble sleeping, a feeling of tension that doesn't fully resolve. These are easy to dismiss, and many people do. But they are signals. The body is saying that its reserves are low, that it does not have enough magnesium to perform all of its functions optimally. The same pattern applies to other nutrients. Zinc is depleted by stress and by sugar metabolism. B vitamins are used up in processing carbohydrates and alcohol. Potassium is lost when insulin is high. These depletions happen gradually, over years, and they contribute to the slow decline in function that many people experience as they age. But if depletion happens gradually, so too can replenishment. The body is remarkably capable of restoring its reserves when given the right materials. A diet rich in nutrient-dense foods, vegetables, meats, seafood, eggs, nuts, seeds, provides the raw materials the body needs. When these foods are eaten regularly, the body can rebuild its stores. Function improves. Symptoms resolve. The signals quiet down. This is not about supplementation. Those supplements can be useful in certain situations. It is about recognizing that the body has ongoing needs, and that meeting those needs consistently over time is what allows it to maintain its reserves. It is about shifting from a mindset of reacting to problems to one of supporting the system so that problems are less likely to arise. The role of stress. When people think about stress, they usually think about its mental and emotional aspects. The pressures of work, financial worries, family concerns. These are real, and they have real effects on the body. But stress is broader than that. It is any demand that requires the body to adapt. And in modern life, the body is adapting constantly. The stress response is an ancient system. When a threat is perceived, the body releases hormones that mobilize energy, increase heart rate, and sharpen focus. This response is designed for short-term use. It gets you through an immediate challenge, and then it subsides. The problems begin when the response does not subside, when the demands are continuous rather than intermittent. Chronic stress keeps the body in a state of low-grade activation. Hormones that should be released in brief pulses remain elevated. Energy that should be used for repair and maintenance is diverted to meet ongoing demands. Over time, this takes a toll. The reserves that would otherwise support long-term health are gradually consumed. The nutrient demands of chronic stress are significant. Magnesium is excreted more rapidly. Zinc is used up in the production of stress-related enzymes. B vitamins are needed to support the nervous system under pressure. The person under chronic stress may be eating the same diet as someone who is not stressed, but they are using up nutrients at a faster rate, without increased intake, or without reducing the stress. Depletion is almost inevitable. This is one reason why two people can eat similar diets and have very different health outcomes. The person with fewer demands on their system less stress. Better sleep, more recovery time, may thrive on a diet that leaves the other person depleted. It is not just about what you eat. It is about what your body is being asked to do with what you eat. Sleep is the body's primary recovery period. During sleep, the stress response subsides. Repair processes are activated. The brain clears out metabolic waste. Hormones that support tissue maintenance are released. When sleep is inadequate or poor quality, this recovery does not happen fully. The next day begins with a deficit, and over time, these deficits accumulate. Physical activity, interestingly, can both create stress and reduce it. Intense exercise is a stressor. It demands that the body adapt, and in adapting, it becomes stronger. But exercise also provides a release for the stress response. It uses up the stress hormones that have accumulated. It shifts the nervous system from a state of activation to a state of calm. The key is balance. Too little exercise, and the body never gets this release. Too much, without adequate recovery, and exercise itself becomes a source of chronic stress. The practical message is not that stress must be eliminated. That is neither possible nor desirable. Some stress is necessary for growth and adaptation. The goal is to manage the balance between stress and recovery, to recognize when demands are exceeding capacity, to build in periods of rest and replenishment, to support the body with the nutrients it needs to handle the demands placed upon it. This is not about avoiding life. It is about living in a way that is sustainable over the long term. The question of grains. Grains occupy an interesting place in the human diet. They have been a staple food for thousands of years, and for much of that time, they supported healthy populations. Yet today, grains are often implicated in various health problems. What changed? The answer is not simple, but there are several factors worth considering. Traditional grain preparation was labor-intensive. Grains were soaked, fermented, or sprouted before they were eaten. These processes served purposes that modern food production has largely abandoned. Soaking and fermenting break down compounds that can interfere with nutrient absorption. They also partially digest the grains themselves, making them easier for the human digestive system to handle. Phytic acid is one such compound, found in the bran of grains. Phytic acid binds to minerals, zinc, iron, calcium, magnesium, and prevents their absorption. In small amounts, this may not matter. But when grains make up a large portion of the diet, and when they are not prepared in ways that reduce phytic acid, the cumulative effect on mineral status can be significant. A person eating whole grains for their health may, ironically, be absorbing less of the minerals those grains contain. Gluten is another consideration. Gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. For some people, it triggers an immune response that damages the lining of the intestine. This is celiac disease, and it affects a small percentage of the population. But there is a broader category of gluten sensitivity, less well-defined but increasingly recognized, in which people experience symptoms, bloating, fatigue, brain fog after consuming gluten, without having the intestinal damage characteristic of celiac disease. Modern wheat is different from the wheat of previous generations. It has been bred for higher yield and for protein content that makes it better suited to industrial baking. These changes have altered the gluten proteins in ways that may make them more problematic for some people. Whether this fully explains the increase in reported gluten sensitivity is debated. But it is worth noting that the wheat eaten today is not the same as the wheat eaten a century ago. There is also the question of what else is in grains. Glyphosate, an herbicide, is used on many conventionally grown grain crops, not just to control weeds, but also to dry the grain before harvest. Residues remain on the grain and can end up in the final product. The health effects of chronic low-level glyphosate exposure are not fully understood, but there is concern about its potential to disrupt gut bacteria and contribute to various health problems. None of this means that grains must be avoided entirely. Many people tolerate them well, and whole grains can be part of a healthy diet. But it does suggest that the way grains are prepared matters. Traditional methods, sourdough fermentation, long soaking, sprouting, reduce phytic acid and partially break down gluten. They make grains more digestible and improve mineral availability. If grains are a regular part of your diet, these traditional preparations may be worth seeking out. The question of fruit. Fruit presents a similar puzzle. It is clearly a natural food, and it contains vitamins, minerals, and beneficial plant compounds. Yet fruit today is different from the fruit our ancestors ate. Through selective breeding, fruits have been made larger and sweeter. A modern apple contains more sugar than a wild apple. A modern grape is a different thing entirely from its wild counterpart. There is also the question of availability. For most of human history, fruit was seasonal. It was available for a few months of the year, and for the rest of the year, it was not. The body evolved in this context. It may be adapted to handle the sugar in fruit when fruit is consumed occasionally and in season. Whether it is adapted to handle year-round access to high-sugar fruit is another question. The comparison between fruit and refined sugar is worth making, but it is also important not to conflate the two. Fruit contains fiber, which slows the absorption of its sugars. It contains water, which dilutes them. It contains a wide array of plant compounds, polyphenol, flavonoids, that have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. These compounds are largely absent from refined sugar. A piece of fruit and a spoonful of sugar are not the same thing, even if they both contain sugar. For someone with well-functioning metabolism, fruit in reasonable amounts is unlikely to be problematic. For someone with insulin resistance or diabetes, the situation may be different. The sugars in fruit, while buffered by fiber, still need to be managed. Large amounts of fruit can still challenge a compromised system. This is where context becomes important. There are few universal rules in nutrition. What works for one person may not work for another, and what is beneficial in one context may be problematic in another. The timing of eating, when food is eaten, may be as important as what is eaten. The body operates on rhythms. Hormones rise and fall in cycles. Digestive enzymes are produced in patterns. The sensitivity of cells to insulin varies throughout the day. Eating in alignment with these rhythms supports the body's natural processes. Eating against them creates stress. The most obvious rhythm is the daily cycle of light and dark. Humans are diurnal animals. We are designed to be active during the day and to rest at night. Digestion follows this pattern. Enzyme production and gut motility are higher during the day and lower at night. Eating late in the evening, when the digestive system is preparing to rest, places a different demand on the body than eating earlier in the day. There is also the rhythm of feeding and fasting. For most of human history, meals were not constant. There were periods of eating and periods of not eating. The body adapted to this pattern. During fasting periods, cellular repair processes are activated. Damaged components are cleared out. Energy metabolism shifts to using stored fat. These processes are beneficial, and they require time to occur. When eating is continuous throughout the day, these repair processes may not have the opportunity to fully engage. This does not mean that everyone must follow a strict eating schedule. It means that giving the body regular periods without food may support its long-term function. For some, this means simply not eating after dinner and waiting until morning to eat again. For others, it means occasionally extending the overnight fast to 14 or 16 hours. The specific pattern matters less than the principle. Periods without food allow the body to focus on maintenance rather than digestion. Movement and the body's design. The human body was designed to move. This is not a moral statement or a fitness slogan. It is a statement of biological fact. Every system in the body responds to movement. Muscles, bones, blood vessels, nerves, all of them function differently when they are regularly challenged by physical activity. Muscles, when they contract, release compounds that travel through the bloodstream and influence other tissues. These compounds, sometimes called myokines, affect brain function, metabolic health, and inflammation. A sedentary person is not just missing out on the benefits of exercise. They are missing out on a whole category of signaling molecules that help coordinate the body's systems. Bone responds to load. When bones are regularly subjected to the forces generated by movement, they maintain their density. When they are not, they gradually lose it. This is why weight-bearing activity is important for maintaining bone strength as the years pass. The stimulus does not need to be intense. Walking, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, these everyday activities provide the signals that tell bones to hold on to their mineral content. Blood vessels also respond to movement. When muscles contract, they compress veins and help push blood back toward the heart. This pumping action supports circulation and reduces the workload on the heart itself. Regular movement also helps maintain the flexibility of arteries, which tends to decline with age in sedentary individuals. Nerve function is supported by movement as well. Balance, coordination, and the speed of neural processing all benefit from regular physical activity. The connection between movement and cognitive function is well documented. People who remain physically active tend to maintain sharper thinking as they age. The type of movement matters less than the consistency. Walking, gardening, dancing, swimming, lifting, all of it counts. The goal is not to achieve a certain level of fitness or to meet some external standard. The goal is to provide the body with the stimulation it expects, the stimulation it needs to maintain its systems over the long term. The social dimension. Humans are social animals. This is not a sentimental observation. It is a biological fact. The human brain evolved in the context of group living, and it expects social connection. When that connection is absent, the body notices. Loneliness is not just an emotional state. It is a physiological stressor. People who are socially isolated show higher levels of stress hormones, more inflammation, and poorer immune function. The effects are comparable to those of smoking or obesity. This is not about being popular or having many friends. It is about having meaningful connections with others. Social engagement also provides cognitive stimulation, conversation, shared activities, and simply being around other people all challenge the brain in ways that solitary activities do not. The brain is a social organ. It develops in response to social input, and it maintains its function partly through social engagement. For older adults, maintaining social connections can require more effort. Retirement, the loss of loved ones, and physical limitations can all reduce opportunities for social contact. But the need for connection does not diminish. Finding ways to stay engaged through community activities, volunteer work, regular contact with family and friends, or group-based recreational activities supports health in ways that are difficult to replicate through any other means. The environment and its influences. The environment in which we live shapes our health in ways that are easy to overlook. We are constantly exposed to substances that did not exist for most of human history. Industrial chemicals, pesticides, plastics, and pollutants are present in air, water, food, and household products. Their effects are subtle and cumulative, and they are difficult to study. But there is reason to believe they matter. The body has systems for dealing with environmental toxins. The liver, kidneys, and digestive tract all work to neutralize and eliminate substances that should not be there. But these systems have limits. When the load exceeds the capacity to process it, substances can accumulate. Over time, this accumulation may contribute to various health problems. This is not a reason for alarm. The human body is remarkably capable, and it handles a great deal without obvious consequence. But it is a reason for awareness. Reducing unnecessary exposures, choosing foods grown without heavy pesticide use, filtering drinking water, using household cleaners that do not contain harsh chemicals, avoiding plastic food containers may reduce the burden on the body's detoxification systems. There is also the question of what is missing from the modern environment. Sunlight, for example, is essential for vitamin D production, yet many people spend most of their time indoors. Contact with soil and with the natural world exposes us to microorganisms that may train the immune system. Time in nature has been shown to reduce stress hormones and improve mood. The modern environment is convenient, but it may not provide all the inputs the body expects. Putting it together, none of these factors operates in isolation. Diet, stress, movement, sleep, social connection, environmental exposures, all of them interact. A person who eats well but is chronically stressed may not see the benefits they expect. A person who exercises but sleeps poorly may find their progress limited. A person who has strong social connections but eats a poor diet may still face health challenges. The body is a system, and systems must be considered as wholes. This can feel overwhelming. If everything matters, where do you start? The answer is that you start where you are. You do not need to address everything at once. Small changes, made consistently, accumulate over time. A shift toward more vegetables at meals. A walk after dinner instead of sitting. An effort to go to bed a little earlier. A phone call to a friend you have not spoken with in a while. These are not dramatic interventions, but they are the kind of changes that, sustained over months and years, shape the trajectory of health. The body is resilient. It wants to function well. Given half a chance, it will do remarkable things. The role of conscious choice is simply to give it that chance, to provide the materials it needs, to avoid placing unnecessary demands upon it, to allow it the time it needs for repair and recovery, to keep it engaged with the world through movement and connection. These are not complicated tasks, but they are ongoing. They are not about perfection. They are about persistence. The question of time. There is a tendency, when thinking about health, to focus on the short term, to want quick results, to look for solutions that will change things now. This is understandable. Life is lived in the present, and the present is where we feel discomfort and seek relief. But the body operates on longer timescales. The effects of choices made today may not be apparent for years. The depletion that leads to problems in later life happens gradually, invisibly, until one day the reserves are gone and the symptoms appear. The replenishment that restores function also happens gradually. There are no shortcuts. There is only consistency over time. This is not a discouraging message. It is a liberating one. If the body works on long timescales, then small choices matter. The walk you take today, the vegetables you eat, the sleep you get, the connection you maintain, all of it contributes to a trajectory. No single choice determines the outcome, but the accumulation of choices, over years and decades, shapes where you end up. The goal is not to live forever. That is not possible, and it is not the point. The goal is to maintain function for as long as possible, to be able to do the things that matter, to remain engaged with life, to have the energy and clarity to participate fully. This is what people mean when they talk about aging well. It is not about avoiding age. It is about living fully at every age. A final observation. If there is a single principle that emerges from all of this, it is that the body responds to how it is treated. It is not a machine that simply runs down. It is a living system that adapts, repairs, and maintains itself, but only when given the conditions it needs to do so. Those conditions are not mysterious. They are the conditions under which humans have lived for most of our history. Real food, regular movement, adequate rest, meaningful connection, and time in the natural world. Modern life makes it easy to drift away from these conditions. It offers constant food, constant stimulation, constant demands. It replaces movement with convenience, connection with screens, and rest with endless activity. These are not moral failings. They are the conditions of the world we live in. But they are also choices. Not in the sense that every moment offers a perfect choice, but in the sense that, over time, we can steer ourselves back toward the conditions our bodies expect. The body does not judge. It does not keep score. It simply responds. Give it what it needs, and it will do what it can with what it has. Withhold what it needs, and it will still do what it can. But the capacity diminishes over time. This is not punishment. It is just how living systems work. Understanding this does not require becoming an expert in biology or nutrition. It does not require following a strict set of rules. It requires only a willingness to pay attention, to notice how the body responds, and to make small adjustments based on what you observe. The body communicates constantly. It sends signals. Learning to read those signals, and to respond to them with kindness rather than with demands, is perhaps the most practical skill there is. The years will pass regardless. That is the nature of time. What those years bring, in terms of how you feel and what you can do, is shaped in part by choices made along the way. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. The body is resilient. It is forgiving. And it is always responding. So perhaps the question is not whether we can stop the passage of time, but whether we can learn to work with the body rather than against it. To recognize that every small choice, what we eat, how we move, when we rest, who we connect with, sends a signal. And the body, in its quiet way, is always listening. It does not judge. It does not keep score. It simply responds, accumulating the effects of those signals into the person we become. If this idea resonates with you, if it raises questions about your own patterns or invites reflection on what might be possible, we would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you would like to continue exploring the collected wisdom of healthy aging, we invite you to explore other films in this library and to subscribe so that new editions find their way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.